Theodosia. Brandon Tessers is in the restroom right now. Hello, hello. I didn't realize it didn't start. Hello, hello. Welcome to the This Is Not Therapy Hour. My name is Olivia Candosia. I'm an intern here at Effective Artistry. Brandon Tessers is in the restroom. He is a mental health counselor, but this is not therapy. One of the reasons, many reasons it's not therapy is because we are live. So keep that in mind when you are commenting or participating in the chat with us. Effective Artistry is out here in the northern suburbs of Illinois. This is my first time doing the introduction alone, so forgive me. Effective Artistry, we specialize in executive functioning coaching and neurodiversity. I'm an intern, like I said, and so I am under Brandon's supervision, and he helps guide me through the clients that I'm seeing. Let's see, what else? We don't have anything in mind that we're going to talk about. We will try our best to talk about what you are interested in hearing about, but the more we know about you, the more you comment and interact with us, the more we will be able to guide our discussion. So feel free to just speak your mind, say whatever you'd like, interrupt us, please. We have no path that we're heading towards. We are just along for the ride. And if we don't interrupt Brandon, he'll never stop talking. So something I have learned is interrupt Brandon. It is okay. He welcomes it. He encourages it. Interrupt me as well, because we want to make what we're talking about interesting for y'all. So with that being said, we're just going to wait for Brandon. If anyone has anything they want to chat about, feel free. But in the meantime, I'll just be sitting here thinking of things that you might want to talk about. I'm not too sure. I'm still new in this whole therapy world. My background was acting, my undergrad, and I went to clown school for a bit in Italy, thinking I was going to be doing like clown work with refugees and things like that. And then I settled on drama therapy and mental health counseling, and now I'm here at Effective Artistry. Hi, Brandon. Hello, Brandon. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to see you, Olivia. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm feeling the start of like the winter depression hit a little bit. So I'm like, but I'm okay. It was good to be back in the office today.
Yeah. Thank you for starting this off while I ran to the restroom real quick. Where did you get? What do we still need to say?
I think I got everything. I just started talking about me afterwards. I don't know.
Okay, well, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am working from home today because I got sick over the weekend and I'm mostly feeling all right. Little rundown, and obviously my voice is off, and I have like I cough once every couple hours or so. So I stayed out of the office to avoid exposing anybody. Just as an explanation for everybody why I'm in a different place. Um, yeah, what's been going on? This is the first Olivia and I have spoken in
It's been like a week. I haven't.
yeah since last Monday, since the last stream, I guess, because with the
Yeah.
holiday.
I mean, I was off all of last week, kind of. And so just kind of navigating like what to do with that extra time is always really challenging for me. Um, and so
What do you mean? Having
um,
extra time is more challenging?
it's more challenging because like when I have things on my to-do list, it's easier because I'm like, oh yes, things I need to do. But when I don't have that, it's so open-ended, it overwhelms me. Um,
What overwhelms you?
I think like the choice to do whatever, like making a choice to watch a show, to I don't know, reach out to people. It's very overwhelming for me.
That's interesting. I mean, not that I can't read between the lines a bit and get what I think you're talking about, but I'm asking these questions because it's useful to
Yeah.
prompt you to put it into more precise language, both for yourself and for me and for people who are watching.
Hmm.
Uh, Typically, though, overwhelmed is something that, and this is not about like correct or incorrect usage of language, just typically overwhelmed is something we associate with like having too much on our plate or too much information to consider and feeling like we
Hmm.
cannot handle it all.
Hmm.
So, in this case, obviously, it's not too much on your plate. So, you're
Maybe
talking
it's
about too much information to consider.
maybe too much time to think about. It feels like that. It's like, oh my God, I
Yeah.
can think about everything in my future. And
But about what? That's the thing. And like I said, I'm reading between the lines, and I have some guesses about where this is
I
going.
would
But
say, I would say purpose. I would say like who I am, like my wants, my desires, things like that.
yeah, so a lot of it is just you don't know what to do when you have a to-do list, or when you have a boss, or when you have a deadline or whatever telling
Mhm.
you this is what you need to do. You use that word need, then you don't have to go through the process of determining like what should I do.
Right.
In the absence of that, what should I do becomes a very difficult question to answer.
Oh, it's the worst, Brandon. I hate that. I hate that question.
Yeah, well, it can't be answered in that way.
Yeah.
The nature of the question, right? Like the idea, what should I do, should there implies that there is a correct or optimal thing to do,
Right.
which means that that's only something that can be answered when there is explicit instruction given about what would be optimal to do.
Right.
Because that's a while it is a very useful thing, or at least can be, often is a very useful thing, it's not actually possible to be true. Like we can't ever actually identify like if I do this thing for the next hour as opposed to anything else I could do, that will have the optimal effects for the rest of my life, whatever. But that's silly to kind of consider it up to that point.
Right.
So you're trying to answer a question that requires that you have somebody telling you to do something without somebody telling you to do something, and you can't. But if you just think of it as what do I have the impulse to do, then you can answer it.
I don't know about that. I don't
Well,
know.
you gave a couple examples like watching TV. At some point, you had the thought, oh, I could watch TV.
Yes, but then I turn on the TV and I look and I'm like, nothing looks interesting. Like none of this is
Which is
this is
routed through your predictions about like, if I were to watch this thing, will it keep my interest for 20 to 40 minutes or however
yes,
long the thing is? So you,
yes.
again, that you slipped back into what is the best way to use the time instead of just like, oh, that looks interesting. Let me try it. And if it turns out to be boring or whatever, or not even that looks interesting, but just like, I don't know, that catches my attention. I'm going to put it on.
Ugh.
Turns out to be boring. You just change it.
But then I'm back to the beginning again, which is
No,
just
because you'll have an impulse to do something else.
yeah, yeah.
This is a real thing that is very challenging for many, many, many people, especially the kinds of people who tend to show up for this stream
Hmm.
and the kinds of people we are and that our clients tend to be. There's this premise that there is an answer to the question of what would be best for me to do next,
Hmm.
which isn't actually true. Like there is no answer to that question.
Hmm.
Not strictly, not literally in terms of like what would actually be best. Uh, and so we get stuck on that
Hmm.
because we don't follow our impulses, and we don't even actually, in the way we've talked about interoceptive hyposensitivity in the past. I don't know if I've used that phrasing with you,
I
but
don't I don't remember.
uh, interoception is the sense of the internal state of the body, like the sense of the nerve endings on the bladder and on the
Hmm.
stomach that determine like pressure and whatever. Uh, it is certainly true that it varies from person to person how much attention we pay to the data that sense is providing. In the same way that there's hypersensitivity too much and hyposensitivity too little to auditory data or any other sense. Same with interoceptive. And it makes sense, right? Like feeling the need to use the bathroom, the urge to use the restroom is uncomfortable. If you're feeling it at a time where it isn't possible, it isn't feasible, viable for you to be able to use the restroom, then it's just an unenjoyable experience. And noticing that data doesn't do anything for you because you can't go use the restroom then anyway. It just
Hmm.
makes your experience worse. So you repeat that experience over time, especially earlier on. And over time, all the like processes that dictate what things get bumped to the top of the list, what's most worth noticing, that stuff's just not very worth noticing. So you end up not noticing it very much. What is your impulse? what does your body have the impulse to do is a similar thing. It's there, but
But how do we know? Like, how do you listen to that? Like,
yeah, it takes training. Well, it doesn't, in the same way that when we potty train children, right, we teach them to pay attention to these interoceptive cues and to learn to associate a certain sensation with an abstract concept of what that sensation indicates is happening and what is best to do next, right?
mhm,
Uh, Same deal. Those impulses are there. You just have lived a life where your opportunities to just follow your impulses have been so few and far between. And being aware of your impulses, but then having to override them and not engage in them anyway is just uncomfortable. And so paying attention to that data has not been useful to you.
mhm,
And over time, the processes are just like, well, bump it down the list. It's not worth really noticing.
mhm,
But then when you get these opportunities, it is worth noticing, but you're still trying to execute the way you typically execute.
mhm.
Yeah, you have to just check in with those impulses.
Yeah.
I like kind of litmus test, I suppose, for what's an impulse versus any other kind of like desire or want or whatever is if you're thinking about anything that isn't in the moment, it's not an impulse. If you're thinking about whether something will be enjoyable in the future, even just a few minutes in the future, that's not an
Mhm,
impulse. If you're thinking about what something might mean or represent or indicate or contribute to, that's not an impulse.
mhm.
But you literally have impulses all the time without noticing it.
Can I be 22 again? It was so much easier to be impulsive. It
I
feels
highly
like,
doubt that.
no, I feel like that was like my impulsive stage in life. It's like I don't know.
What do you mean by impulsive?
I guess what I mean by impulsive is I wasn't like following the norm of a path, and I was doing things that kind of interest me and I had the freedom to do. Um,
That's cool. That's not what we're talking about with the way I'm using impulse. That's just non-traditional or counterculture or
yeah.
brave or risky or whatever. Um, I don't remember ever having an impulsive stage. Well, every baby starts in an impulsive stage. So you might not remember it, but you had it. And right now, Olivia, you are resting your cheek on your hand. Did
Uh-huh.
you think about that and make a conscious decision to do that?
Not this time around, but sometimes.
So this time around, that was the result of an impulse.
Yeah.
When what I'm using the word impulse to mean, I don't remember being a baby, doesn't count. Well, I guess uh, but what I'm using the word impulse to mean, what I'm talking about is when your body is organized in the way in which it needs to be organized in order to take a particular action.
Hmm.
Meaning, like in the moment before you rest your cheek on your hand,
Hmm.
the skeletal muscular system, the nervous system, the electricity, like if we could take a snapshot in the moment before that happens, there are electrical signals passing along nerves and whatever. Uh, that's impulse. It's an unconsidered, it's not something you're thinking about. It's just what your body does without consideration.
Hmm.
So you're kind of defining it in a way that makes it impossible to be impulsive because you're saying, well, I try to think about what my impulse is and I can't find it. And yeah, that's not what an impulse is.
Yeah.
But you follow your impulses all the time, like literally every moment. Same with you, Bast Insider. We all follow impulses every moment. The way that you're sitting, the muscles that are tensed in order to hold you in a particular position, et cetera, et cetera.
Hmm.
Right. So what we're really talking about is where we've inserted cognition. Because the point of cognition is that it allows you, doesn't sound like me, is that it allows you to override impulse. You've heard me use phrases like unconsidered response to stimuli or whatever. Our body, each person's body, will respond to any given set of stimuli without consciousness.
Hmm.
in some particular way. If that particular way is a lack of motion or whatever, that's still a response to stimuli. I think about gravity existing and the feeling of the chair I'm sitting on at all times.
I do
Uh,
like, since we've talked about like vocal stimming, which I guess is something I've been doing, I have noticed myself not doing it. And I'm like, you're not making noise. And I don't know. I don't know if that's relevant, but
as
I've
in,
been,
like, you notice that you are doing it less than you used to be doing it.
yeah, yeah.
How
And
would you know that if you didn't pay attention to how often you were doing it before?
I guess I wouldn't, but it feels a lot quieter around here. I don't guess you're right, but
So you're saying, here's a thing that I didn't track. As soon as I started tracking it, I
like, I
became
feel it.
certain that I'm doing it less than I used to, but you have no baseline to compare it to.
Yeah.
While that could theoretically be true, right? Potentially it is true. What it really indicates is that you have a default tendency to assume that once you start paying attention to something, you are in some way interfering and making it worse.
Yeah.
Just now that I'm noticing it, I must have messed it up somehow.
Yeah. That sounds lovely. That's awful.
Yeah.
That
But
sucks.
it's like what you were talking about last week, right? Is like as soon as I notice that I am considering what to do with my time,
Mhm.
now I'm definitely messing something up. I'm
Mhm.
not doing what I should be doing.
Mhm.
But thought, cognition is itself an impulse. So you had the impulse to think about what to do. Fine. What's the problem with that?
Perhaps there is none.
Well, I'm not suggesting that there isn't, although maybe there isn't. I legitimately mean for you, what about that is different than you would want it to be?
It ends up just being like a spiral of thoughts, and a choice is never made. I feel like I'm waiting to pick one of them to act upon.
The choice is made to continue to think, if
Yeah.
you want to call that a choice.
Yeah.
So again, all you're really thinking is that whatever I'm doing isn't the thing I should be doing.
Yeah.
I shouldn't be thinking about this stuff. I should just do something without thinking.
Hmm.
And everything I was just saying can like be interpreted to reinforce that, right? That I'm saying about like not noticing your impulses, whatever. That can very much appeal to people who are thinking like, I'm definitely thinking more than I should, not doing what I should. Saying it that way can be like, oh yeah, he's right. This isn't what I should be doing, and I was made to be this way for whatever reason, you know.
Hmm.
But it's not about should, not in the way that we're talking about it right now. It's about whether you enjoy it or don't enjoy it. If you don't enjoy it, then let's look at changing it.
Yeah,
But
that's it. It's annoying to me. I just get
well,
annoyed.
what about it is annoying to you?
I it's it's my whole thing of it. It's not stimulating. It's not interesting. I want to be moving and
If it's
grooving.
not stimulating or interesting, then why are you thinking about it? Something which is interesting by definition is something which has captured your interest, your attention. This has.
Yeah.
So it is interesting, but you don't think it should be.
Yeah. Or it's not fun. It's not fun. I want more fun in my life, Brendan.
But you started this by saying that, like, normally I have a big list of stuff that I need to do, whether I think it's fun or not, and I prefer that. So it's not really about fun either.
Structure,
Structure
routine.
helps you to avoid encountering this particular problem,
Yeah.
but it's not what the problem is. The problem is just you're doing something you don't think you should be doing. You're not sure what you should do.
Yeah.
Not what you want to do, just what would be best to do. That's it.
Yeah. And it just comes with all of these like judgments. Yeah.
I'm wasting my time.
Hmm.
I should be using this time differently, better. I should be more impulsive, which is a hilariously tragic thought to think.
So tragic.
Yeah, it's not that there's kind of a corny therapist-y phrase that I think is a useful one, even though I also think it's corny, which is stop shooting on yourself. Therapists will say that
Mhm.
sometimes. Stop shooting on yourself. And again, it's not that saying should is bad, because even that sentiment is you shouldn't say should so much. So that's not possible,
Mhm.
right? Like You're just judging yourself for judging yourself. Doesn't make you judge yourself less. You're just
Right.
judging yourself about judging yourself. The point is that it's a tool and it's useful in the right context, given the right criteria, and it's not useful at other times. Again, none of this ever is about figuring out what's good and what's bad. It's about figuring out what is the utility of something, being able to be more discerning about when something is useful or applicable and when it isn't. There's nothing that's just all good or all bad in all contexts. So thinking about what you should do just means you're thinking about what will the ramifications be of whatever you do.
Yes. Yes.
What will the results, the impact, or the follow up, what will happen as a result of what I do is
Yes.
when you're talking
And I
about what you
think
should do.
about I think about those. I'm gonna call them stupid because they're stupid to me. Those like how many days you've lived, all the little black boxes, and then how many days you probably have left if you were to live to like 100. And then you look at that visual of like this is the amount of days you have left. Like make the most of them, do the most, be the best. And it's just like, oh my god, I used a whole day of just like sleeping, or like I did a whole day of doing this. Now that's gone forever. It's
So
just
let's explore this. If I were to make the most of a day or every day for the rest of my life, what is the metric that I would
I
pay
don't know.
attention to determine whether that's the case? Like, oh, I had a therapist that jumped on every time I said should from the first meeting. Yeah, that's why I'm pointing out that it's a corny thing because, it can be useful, but people turn it into a rule that you shouldn't say should, which is, again, hilariously tragic because that's a should. You should not say should is absurd. Anyway, what is
What
the
is the
point?
metric?
Yeah, if I used every day to the most, what would the result of that be? How would I know that that's the case?
I don't fucking know. I don't know. I mean,
Well, that seems kind of important, right?
well, it's frustrating too because like if it's a day I'm sick, I'm like, I am making the most of this day because I'm laying in bed and I'm sick. So like this makes sense. But if I'm not sick, that it doesn't feel as doesn't feel as making the most. I don't know.
Sure. But again, what is the point? If we make the most of every day, what is the result of that?
Uh, joy, I don't know,
Oh,
feeling good, happiness.
okay. Yeah, I agree. That's
Mhm.
kind of the inevitable conclusion. Anything else is just like a theory about how to get there. I got to
Yep.
work hard so I can be successful. Why? So I can make money. Why? So I can have a good life. Why? So I can be happy. Like it's at the end of the day, it always eventually comes back around to like, what's the best way to be the most happy?
Hmm.
So I'm looking at a thing that's exhorting me, telling me to make the most of my day, and it's making me very unhappy to look at this thing. Isn't that counterproductive?
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Honestly, I was just telling this to a client. If you want to make a lot of money, just identify a group of people engaged in a certain activity or a set of activities and tell them that they can have everything that they want if they just stop doing those things. You don't have to tell them what they should be doing instead. But if you just say, like when you scroll on your phone
Huh?
on TikTok or social media, do you notice how many of those social media posts are saying, get up off your phone and go do stuff?
Hmm.
A message that is explicitly only accessible to people who are currently on their phone,
Hmm.
a message that is generated by a person who was using their phone in order to create and share the message,
Hmm.
and whose entire livelihood and career very likely rests on not only them using their phone and social media, but everybody else using their phones and social media as well. Are
Hmm.
they really actually invested in everybody stopping using social media? Or do they want as many people as possible to follow them?
Don't like that.
Because here's the thing, it is an intrinsic part of being human. Oh, hold on. It got really annoying. Made me constantly watch my language. Like maybe it's a good word for what I feel, and we can talk about why I feel that way. But I don't think they needed to nitpick every time I used the word when they knew what I meant. Sure. Hey, you person on your phone, go touch grass. Um, an inherent experience as a human is that you want things, and by definition, any version of the word want that we're talking about, and there's a bunch of different versions of it, but all of it refers to something that you don't currently have but would prefer that you did.
Mm-hmm.
right? That's what it means to want something. So by definition, all people at all times are aware of a bunch of stuff that they would prefer that they have that they don't currently have.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody is 100% satisfied with their life, with the state of their world. In a given moment, depending on what we're paying attention to or focused on, certainly, and even for long periods, like minutes at a time, hours at a time, we can not be aware of things that we would like to be different about our lives or whatever. Uh, but there's always that stuff. And so everybody wants stuff they don't have, which also means that everybody wants it to be true that there is a way to get the things that they want but don't currently have.
What about not wanting what you want? Is that a thing, or do you always
Not
know?
wanting what you want. What do you mean?
I mean, not want, not knowing what you want. Sorry.
Oh,
Is
that's a thing, but only with a very specific definition of want.
mm.
There's a line from a Conor Oberst song that I get stuck in my head all the time. My mind races with all my longings, but can't keep up with what I've got. Some to the tune of Ode to Joy. Yeah, that's a good song. Conor Oberst. I know him as Bright Eyes, but I like him. My mind races with all my longings, but can't keep up with what I've got. Uh, yeah, again, it's the point of cognition, right? Thought,
Mm.
consciousness has no ability to interact with the actual physical environment. It's Plato's the cave. It's whatever. The map is not the territory, right? Our conscious awareness of anything that's real is filtered through our own perception and blah 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 blah. Consciousness is not for interacting with the actual real world. That's what the body is for.
That's annoying.
It's only annoying if you think that's what consciousness is supposed to be for. And so when you think that and you start to come up against because if that were true, there are a bunch of things that are currently true that wouldn't be. In other words, if you believe that consciousness, that it is possible for humans to actually know and directly, consciously aware, interact with the environment, whatever, you're wrong. And all kinds of stuff are going to happen all the time that doesn't make any sense. And it becomes clear that you're wrong about stuff.
So, what is my consciousness for, Brandon?
Consciousness is for considering things that are not present, what could be, because we need both.
Mm-hmm.
In order to do what we do. We need to have an awareness of what is, an ability to interact with what is. That's the body. We also benefit from having an ability to consider, to contemplate, to conceptualize things that aren't real right now,
I'm
but that
feeling
could theoretically be or whatever.
I get frustrated. I know you said my 22-year-old self was not impulsive, or the definition that we were talking
Not
about.
just the way I was using it, and the
Yeah,
way
yeah.
you use it, sure.
I'm thinking about in high school and how carpe diem was my mantra. I loved that. I had so many things about that, and really tried to live my life like that. And it felt like I could feel it viscerally, in my body. And now I don't feel that. And I'm wondering if that's just a developmental thing of because you just feel a lot when you're in your teens and adolescent stage, or I don't know.
What do you mean by feeling
I don't
that?
know, all the
What did you
hormones.
feel?
What'd you say?
You didn't feel hormones. What you said, feeling that. What's the that
Feeling,
you felt?
it just felt so important. Everything had such
That's not a
stake.
feeling.
I don't know.
That's a thought. Everything
Yeah,
seems important. You're behaving as though everything is so important to you.
yes. And now I don't behave that way.
All right.
Carpe
Well, there's
diem.
another quote from that song. I could have been a famous singer if I had someone else's voice. Oh, Conor Oberst. I have a drink coaster that says Carpe Diem, DM as in Dungeon Master, which I have to clarify you should not translate literally. That's fun. Okay. When you're a baby,
Mm-hmm.
when a baby is first born, we'll say, where's the actual distinction? We're just speculating about all this stuff,
Okay.
right? At what point does a human become conscious really depends on what you mean by consciousness, and we're just speculating
Mm-hmm.
anyway. But in your first moment of consciousness, whenever that is, you have no information to suggest that there's anything other than that first moment, right?
Right.
In the second moment, however you want to divide it up, you are now aware of that moment. And potentially, to some extent, this is like, because you have now become conscious, you have some memory. That's what I would define as the beginning of consciousness, is the ability to hold information abstractly. So remember them. So there's this moment and a previous moment. It's your first experience of comparison, right? That
Mhm.
here's what's happening now, here's what's happened before, but still no idea that that projects into the future or whatever, right?
Mhm.
It takes a certain amount of experiences for you to settle on some prediction that, like, oh, there's going to be more stuff. There's a
Mhm.
future. A simpler, like more common version of this is like if you ask people about summer break when they were in elementary school, didn't it feel like it lasted forever?
Mhm.
That was so long. And then once you went back to school, it was like, oh my gosh, it's forever again.
Mhm.
Because it's pretty easy and logical to say that, like, when you're 8 years old, 3 months of time is a much bigger proportion of your experience than when you're 40 years old.
Right.
So, yeah, everything is going to feel, the younger someone is, the more important everything is going to appear to be, slash, potentially, the more important everything is in terms of like that person's thoughts and feelings and development.
Mhm.
If you come to an idea earlier on, it impacts all your other perceptions and ideas that you develop from that point onward. So there's a reason that therapists and psychologists have a tendency to focus on early childhood experiences. I think sometimes people get blinders on and focus on that too much. Um, but yes, the earlier something happens, the more. So yes, we can colloquially say things like teenagers act like they're invincible, which really just means like they don't have as visceral of a sense of the future. Like I take fewer risks now because I have a much, like, my decision making processes, my attentional
Mhm.
processes, consciously and not consciously, are incorporating the idea that, like, what happens 10 years from now, 20 years from now matters in a way that it didn't used to.
Right.
So there's nothing wrong with that.
Ugh,
This is
I
also
know.
why we like have societal structures that like allocate more decision making power to people as they age, without getting into a very, very recent development in our species, which is that there's also a point at which decision making power should start to decline as a person ages. There's an optimal balance, and that's
I.
thrown out of whack.
Hmm.
Not because of mental decline, that's not what I'm
Mhm.
suggesting, but because there's an optimal balance between using stuff that we've already discovered is helpful versus incorporating new ideas. And coming up with new ideas is something you only do if you don't already have an answer to the problem. So there's an optimal balance between tradition and innovation.
Mhm. I guess my definitions of things are changing, of like what was fun. I don't know. I went to like a Friendsgiving thing last weekend and it was fine. It was pleasant, but I didn't feel like I didn't experience the experience that would have been like, this was a great night. Like it was just fine to me. And I
That's not an
miss,
experience, that's a thought.
I know, but I miss thinking differently. I miss
What
like,
what suggests to you that you used to think that? That's just your memory of what it used to be. Did you think that at the time?
I don't know. I couldn't tell you, I guess.
Here's a general rule of thumb. When we compare ourselves to other people, and this applies to comparing ourselves to other versions of ourselves, both
Mhm.
theoretically real ones like past versions of ourselves, but
Mhm.
also hypothetical ones like me if I had whatever, whatever, right?
Mhm.
Generally, when we're comparing ourselves to other people, we are comparing ourselves in a way where we come up lacking,
Mhm.
where the other person that we're comparing ourselves against is better, doing something better, has something better. You are not thinking about, for example, like, oh, I have a wife and 3 children. I don't have me time anymore. That just doesn't exist in my life. And there are certain times where I'm like, man, if I had the time I used to have to be able to do all this stuff, that'd be great. I don't often think about, like, man, how lonely I used to be,
Mhm.
even though I used to be very, very lonely. and look very much forward to this time in my life.
Yeah.
So again, you're just trusting your own cognition in a way that's causing you distress, which doesn't mean it's not useful. Just stop treating it as though it is totally real. Like
Yeah.
it can be useful. It can even be accurate. It can't be true.
Mhm.
The other Bright Eyes lyric I think about all the time is they crawled from the oceans to paint in the caves, but I'm working all weekend. I need to get paid. Yeah, I'll say something about that in a minute. I have a very clear memory of going to the dentist in middle school, which my parents very rarely remembered to schedule for us, and really really enjoying having clean teeth. And I made the decision there that whatever I did with my life, I needed a job that let me have regular dentist checkups. And I think of that as the day my childhood officially ended. My life goal became regular dentist visits. All right, that's funny and also sad for judging yourself for that. Because another way, you're saying in a very understandable and humorous way, right? You're saying, as soon as I realized the importance of regular dental visits, that's not a childhood thing. But another way to describe it, only with the words you've already used, is you had a really enjoyable experience and decided you wanted to have that really enjoyable experience as much as possible. That's not a childhood thing. I'm not trying to take away something from you and your own like narrative of yourself, but like that's what life is. We just learn more about what we like and what we don't like, and the older we get, the better we become. Not perfect, but like the better we become at organizing our life in such a way where we get more of what we like and less of what we don't like. Of course, that doesn't always happen, but that's the trend line, right? Certainly, if we break it down to like a moment or a minute or an hour or a day, there's all kinds of wild up and down swings. And you could make the argument that for certain people, especially after certain events in their life, it's an overall diminished, it's a down line from there. But on average, the older you are, the more information you have. And so generally that means you become more and more able to make things be the way you want them to be. Anyway, one of my favorite Bright Eyes lyrics, Conor Oberst lyrics, is um, from the song "This Is the First Day of My Life," and I'll have to like sing through it to remember the lyric. Oh my gosh, I would need to like go get
You
my
didn't
guitar to
sing it at all.
actually.
You just thought it.
No, I can only think of the last part of the line, not the first. The last part of the line is I'd rather be working for a paycheck than waiting to win the lottery. Um, yeah, that's where I was born, right in the doorway. I was born for the time.
I said, "Oh, I know the line."
I'm trying to remember the first part. I can't remember the exact words, and I'm like trying to rush through it to get to them, and that's just disrupting my ability to get to them. But the first part of it is something. It gives the the concept is like, will this relationship work out? We don't know,
Hmm.
but I'd rather be working for a paycheck than waiting to win the lottery. Meaning like I'm gonna try, so just waiting around. I like Bright Eyes. Of the I have a limited repertoire of songs that I play and sing on guitar, and two of them are Bright Eyes songs. The other one is Landlocked Blues, and my favorite line from that one is "The world's got me dizzy again. You think after I always change the number of years to whatever age I am. So the world's got me dizzy again. You think after 39 years I'd be used to the spin, but it only gets worse if I stay in one place. That's why I'm always pacing around and walking away." I, I think his poetry is great. It's probably not a surprise that what music I like the most rests a lot on like which lyrics I find to be the most meaningful and poetic.
Hmm.
Anyway, oh yeah, there was a they crawl from the oceans to paint in the caves, but I'm working all weekend. I need to get paid. Yeah, there's an old web comic from it's a web comic called SMBC, Saturday Morning Breakfast Cereal. And my version of remembering that is there's one where there's like a kid who says something about like I love singing or something like that. And adults like, yeah, you think you might want to like be a singer or whatever? And the kid goes on this big philosophical rant about like the point of doing something is not to become expert at it and better than other people. Like humans have sang, humans have danced, and humans have talked and loved and made art for the history of our species. And there is intrinsic joy in the experience of doing it regard and that only gets ruined when you turn it into some comparative thing where you're
You
better
know,
or worse or more or less likely to make money at it.
I just watched Good Will Hunting yesterday, I guess as an impulsive watch. Um, Surprised that I have not watched it before, and that's a message in there. Um, I don't know if you've seen it. I don't know
Yes, I
why.
love it. I
Yeah,
read the script at one point. Yeah.
you read the script at one point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep
Um,
going. What are you saying about it?
what am I saying about it?
Why'd you
No,
bring it up?
no. I'm feeling like so like overwhelmed about like pop culture and when I don't like recognize it. And so I'm like, okay, what do I know about? Like trying to like throw something in. Like I for the longest time I've really struggled with like not knowing like popular movies or like popular songs. Like I've always felt very embarrassed about it. Um
Well,
and
that,
what?
go ahead.
No,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I can understand that for sure, but you brought it up. Why did you bring it up?
Because what you were saying was relevant to it, but I was feeling the emotions about you guys talking about songs that I didn't know about, and then
Oh,
and then I brought up a thing that I knew about, and I was like, "Hey, this relates to what Brandon's talking about," um, which
so in what
is
way does it relate?
it relates in this kid's very good at I don't even know what it is like formulas and science or whatever, and they want him to like get a job in the field because there are only so many people that can like solve the theories and do the things that he's doing, but he doesn't really want to do that. And that's kind of what you were saying, like people, right?
I mean, I think so. Yeah, I think that the major point of that movie, the crux of it, the theme of it is the whole like I got to go see about a girl.
Yeah.
That the whole point is about happiness and
Hmm.
pursuit of what makes you happy, regardless of what makes you the most money or what other people think might be the best idea for you to do or the most interested in you doing,
Hmm.
for whatever reason that might benefit them or whatever. Uh, yeah, I really, I haven't seen that movie in a long time, but I do like it. I think it rests on certain like premises that I think are problematic, but everything in our culture rests on like the idea of intelligence as some intrinsic
Hmm.
quality of a person that just makes them better at anything that they try and whatever.
Hmm.
And that it's like biological in some way that people have no control or ability to impact or whatever. Um, I don't like how his friend talks about every day. I hope that you don't come out of that house. Like
Yeah,
the
that was a
idea
very
that
bizarre
you to be
conversation.
happy, you need to have a different life than what you currently have. But I think that's realistic. I just think
Hmm.
it's presented in a way that makes it seem to the viewer as though it's like a noble thing to think, when I think it's actually a ridiculous thing to think. Um, anyway, it's just there's some stuff in that movie that's I think kind of a big part of the point is trying to make is that intelligence isn't all that important in
Hmm.
terms of like doing the things that being intelligent enables you to do, right? Like, or I guess more like the accoutrement of being intelligent, like fancy education and prestigious this and whatever.
Hmm.
But he also first wrote it as a one act play while he was at Harvard. Uh, so it's just got stuff baked into it about prestige and intelligence and whatever
Right.
being awesome. But I just like it as like two friends wrote a movie about something that meant something to them and then made that movie. And that's cool. And I do love Robin Williams' performance in it.
Hmm.
Anyway, Bright Eyes is not like a mainstream. I mean, like certainly they're not like super underground and vague or
Right,
whatever.
right.
But it's it's indie stuff. It's not
I
like
get
something that most
scared.
people know. Was that?
I get scared when I don't know stuff.
Why?
I feel like I'm like out of the loop. Like I feel like that extra. I
If
don't
you
know.
accurately identify that there's some stuff other people don't know that you don't know, why does that scare you? That's
Uh,
just true.
yeah,
There's stuff other people know that I don't know. I'm not
yeah.
scared of that. Why? Why does it scare you?
Mm, mm.
Best Insider says I was really excited when Brandon got my Bright Eyes reference because it's not common.
Thanks. That's good. That makes me feel better.
It certainly carries a certain amount of like indie cred from a certain time period, like early 2000s. If you know Bright Eyes, like that gives you some indie cred
See, this is, oh my
in
God.
kind of a shallow way.
Okay. Why does it make me scared? I don't know if scared is the right word. It makes me feel, I think I just like want like a sense of like belonging. And so like since like Wicked has come out, it's been like, oh my gosh, like I know about something. I know about like the history of this thing. I can tell my partner about it and know more about something and teach it and like share these little Easter eggs and things about the movie and the storyline. And that's been a really exciting thing because I haven't like been able to do that with a lot of things. Or at least I don't feel like I don't think I have been able to. Um, I don't know, Brendan. What am I trying to say?
I studied acting as a college student from 2005 to 2009, which was like the height of Wicked's
Mhm.
popularity on Broadway. To this day, I have not ever seen the show. I haven't listened to a single one of the songs like
Mhm.
all the way through. I've heard little snippets here and there, just kind of like cultural osmosis and whatever. None of that makes me feel less than for
Yeah.
not knowing about Wicked.
Yeah.
It You were a real early 2000s emo if you thought Bright Eyes was too mainstream. It was not. I was not a real emo. uh, yeah, Bright Eyes was a thing. Like I played a song. Most of the songs I still play on guitar. I played back then. Oh, hi, Brandon, hi. Um, and it was the kind of thing that if I like played it at a party in college, there'd be like one or two other people there, like, yeah, I love Bright Eyes. And like it gives you credibility, but it is still like well known enough to actually, you're not actually listening to some or talking about something that nobody's heard of.
Hmm. I guess,
Um,
I mean, I roll my eyes at trivia things because I'm like, oh, do I roll my eyes? No, I still judge myself for not knowing things that I don't think people need to know. I think I just really have placed like a value on knowing information. And if I
yeah,
don't, then I just like feel shitty. So,
it, that's a common thing because especially in our culture, like there's a lot of truth to knowing stuff is valuable. A lot of the things that are considered to be the most valuable in our culture are based on having certain knowledge, right?
mm,
But that gets taken too far into thinking that it's the only thing that makes a person of value is the knowledge that they have.
mm,
And that it gets wrapped up in all this stuff about like, if I don't know something, if I can't figure out something or solve something, then I'm worthless and people will hate me or leave me or
mm,
realize or whatever.
mm.
Sounds like you need to join the hipster movement. The less you know about pop culture, the more cred you have.
Hey, I lived in Logan Square for a bit. I was almost there. Um, it's Logan
I
Square's a
lived in Logan
neighborhood.
Square before it was gentrified on me. So,
Did you?
well, it was in the process of being gentrified, although I lived in a non-gentrified part of Logan Square for sure in 2010. Um, but I was kind of making a joke about that kind of thing, right? Like the hipster thing of like, oh, I've been in a place that's real terrible. Brandon knows how to belly dance very well. Now he will demonstrate. Neither of those things are statements I would say are accurate.
He's
Uh,
too sick right now.
That's what I do. I'm sorry, I don't know anything about Taylor Swift. That's too mainstream for me. That's one
I
thing
used to like really pride myself on not knowing mainstream things. Like I was like, I'm never watching Game of Thrones. Like that's my cool thing about me. And then I realized like, oh, now I can't talk to people about this really huge thing. Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. It's certainly understandable. Like we are all at all times part of the stuff that our processes take into consideration. A huge portion of it, if not like, I mean, you could argue in some ways that it's the whole of it, is other people's perception, right? Like how we will come across to and impact other people. Uh, so there's nothing silly about dressing a certain kind of a way
Mhm.
or paying attention to a certain kind of a thing or taking pride in not paying attention to a certain kind of a thing, which is also a way of like projecting to people, ways that they can perceive you. I only know about obsolete D&D realms lore and obscure Robert Moses facts and Bart Isley.
I think that's what it is too, is like I have a desire to know about things more in depth, but I don't have that. I don't know. Like I feel like
You don't
I
have what?
I
You have a desire to know about more things in more depth, but you don't have that what?
uh, but I think that I don't know anything expertly enough to have that. Like I want a passion. I want to be a nerd about something, and I don't know. I
You
don't
don't
want
think you have passion?
I don't know if I could like this is how I'm gonna define it. Like, I don't know if I could talk someone's ear off for 3 hours about the same thing for 3 hours that I enjoy.
That's not about whether you're passionate about the thing.
It's not.
No. First of all, I can talk somebody's ear off for 3 hours about something I don't give a crap about.
Yeah.
This is a skill set thing that is not about whether you're passionate about something.
Yeah. I wanna be an encyclopedia about something. I want you to like be able to pull it out of me and be able to share that.
You are. This is going to sound ridiculous to you, but you are. It's about your life. You
Yeah.
know more about your life and your experience than anybody else does.
Yeah. That's very funny.
I could talk someone's ear off about my D&D character for 3 hours because I can make up facts about them on the spot. Yeah, I mean, honestly, a lot of like what people read as confidence is just being willing to say stuff, even when you're not sure that it's, you know, oh, sorry.
Body cramp.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Give me a minute here. I'm gonna turn off my video for just a minute.
We're falling apart here. Part of the what were you saying? I don't even remember. Oh, he went completely gone. I hope he's okay.
Sorry, I'll unmute myself. I'm just in a lot of pain.
Oh, it's okay.
I did not expect that. That's the first time that's happened.
Is it just a body spasm?
Uh, like a cramp, I guess. I, as I often do, I pushed down on the arms of the chair to lift my body up so that I could cross my legs on the front of the chair. I do that all the time. And when I did that, it like these muscles right here just
Oh,
went into a bunch of pain. Still hurts. It's
no.
very strange.
Hmm.
I don't even know what that muscle is, like right under the armpit. Some version of the pec, I guess. I don't know. Ow, that hurts. Anyway, um, the less you are afraid of, all right, what we think of in terms of conversation, in terms of saying something to
Mhm.
somebody. Hold on. Oh, 100%. I feel like around 80% of the time when someone starts explaining something in depth to me, they mostly sound authoritative because they oversimplify.
Hmm.
Um,
I wish they oversimplified to me.
I don't believe you, but okay. I When we're talking about saying something to somebody, like conversation, discussion, in that context, when we're talking about being right or being wrong, what we're really talking about is if this other person either knows about or becomes aware of what other people say about this thing, and those things are different than what I'm saying, then I'm wrong. Does that make sense?
Say it again. I was not listening.
Like, for example, if I were to say that, like, the main character of Wicked is John Hamm, that's wrong because there are many, many sources that would say that no, the main character of Wicked is Elphaba, right?
Mhm.
Uh, so being wrong is about, do other people agree in just in what we're talking about is sharing
Mhm.
information with people. Being wrong, someone perceiving you as being wrong, is about, do other people agree with what you just said,
Mhm.
right? And so when you become very concerned about whether or not you are wrong,
Mhm.
just don't say very much at all.
Mhm.
Because even when you're confident that, like, you have very good sources and you know a lot and have heard, like, I'm very confident that Elphaba is the main character in Wicked, I could technically be wrong. But even if I'm right, it's always possible that the person that I'm talking to, that they're interpreting that what I said to be like, Elphaba's the only important character in Wicked, and they're like, no, Glinda's also really important. You're wrong, or whatever, right? It's this concern about being wrong, sharing information that is wrong.
Mhm.
But if the information I have is wrong, I want to find out about that.
Yeah.
I don't stop myself from saying things that I think might be wrong. I do try to be very clear because of social and cultural reasons. People are hesitant, even if you say something and no, that's wrong, they're hesitant to point that out generally because we think
Mhm.
of that as a confrontational or unpleasant or undesirable thing. So I do try to make an effort to be like, yeah, I'm not sure if this is correct or not, or, this is just my best idea, or what, like how I'm always talking about, I don't know, and whatever.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, that's why I can talk about anything because I'm talking to learn, not
Mhm.
to be impressive. It does
Yeah.
often, like, obviously it works out that talking the way that I talk is impressive to people,
Mhm.
um, but that's not, sometimes that's my explicit or part of my explicit intention, especially when I'm trying to get people to listen to a certain thing that I'm trying to impart to them. The more impressive they find me, the more likely they
Mhm.
are to pay attention to and put into action something that I'm saying. But for the
Hmm.
most part, yeah, I'm just trying to learn. If I'm wrong, I want to find out. I don't want to keep being wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm
You're just
thinking
afraid of being wrong.
yeah, I'm thinking about yes, I talk to connect with people, but I also sorry, I saw a comment. Sometimes I feel like I'm more impressive than the vibe I give off.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that definitely happens.
Um,
Oh, and there was another comment after the, someone oversimple sounding authoritative because they oversimplify was, and because they're presenting their side as fact.
yeah. Maybe that is always my underlying goal is like, are you showing your best skills right now of being smart? When really it would be nice to just talk to learn and like connect through that and not whatever I'm doing. Just,
Yeah, I don't want to give the impression that, like, what I do is just as difficult for me to have learned and become able to do as it would be for you to do the same.
mhm.
That's unknowable, but, like, I have plenty and plenty and plenty of reason to draw the conclusion that no, this is easier for me than it would be for other people.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a man. I am 6'5" and I have a very deep voice. I am a licensed therapist
Mhm.
and went an untraditional route. Like, I started and run my own business, and I
Mhm.
have a wife and 3 kids, and I'm very happy. And like all this stuff where people are going to be impressed by me, quite likely almost regardless of what I say. So that makes it a lot safer for me then to be able to take the risk of people thinking I'm wrong about stuff
Very
because,
trustworthy
like,
things.
is that true? Maybe I don't trust that face. I've been told I'm kind of honest, but I haven't been told I have a trustworthy face before. I hope that's true. I like that. That comment there, sometimes I feel like I'm more impressive than the vibe I give off. I mean, if I'm going to be real nitpicky here, impressive is one of those words that's about like how people perceive you. And so what I would say is people should be more impressed by you than they are. And that almost definitely is true. I trust you to watch my laptop in coffee shop.
100%. I went, it doesn't matter. There was a time, it doesn't matter. It was just somebody asked, hey, can you watch my laptop? And they said, sure. The person left. But then that person needed their laptop to be watched. So they asked somebody else to watch their laptop. So then 2 laptops were being unattended. It was very strange. Unattended and not being watched by who they were promised to be watched by.
Yeah. Look, as one of the like points, one of the ways I can try and make it's impossible to identify every variable that plays into how other people perceive you in terms of impressiveness and confidence and all these things, or anything really. But I can point out, just as an easy example, that doing this, twisting my beard hair, is generally thought of like read in our culture as like, oh, that person is pensive, contemplative, thoughtful, serious, right? Whereas doing this, twisting my head hair, is generally read in our culture as like that person's insecure and nervous and childish.
Mm-hmm.
The action is almost exactly the same. It's really just women are more likely to have hair that they can reach here and less likely to have hair that they can reach here, and men vice versa. So all it really is that our culture ascribes pensiveness to men and insecurity to women, and then anything that we associate with men versus women takes on some of that association.
Mm-hmm.
Just a quick background, I'm working through a medical condition right now that is causing brain fog, attention issues, and with memory and communication. So I'm not how I used to be, working to being back to my old self. But right now I'm working on getting there. But right now I just don't know how to be that old self. Like I'm in there, I'm in there, but functioning isn't the same, if that makes any sense. So it's an odd feeling of I'm a stranger to myself, but I'm still there, trying to work on how to bring the old me back out to the world. On the theme today of like music lyrics, one of my favorite lyrics from a Lizzo song is, I can't even remember what song it is, but at one point it's, I'm not the girl I was or used to be. And then a long pause, ooh, but you might be better. Again, like we were talking about before, when we compare ourselves to other people, including other versions of ourselves, we tend to focus on the ways in which we are lacking in comparison to the other person, the other version of ourselves. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say that what you're experiencing isn't real. It obviously is. It's your experience. And I want to be careful about how I phrase this. So it's impossible to identify all the variables that play into something, right? I went through a very, very difficult time emotionally, cognitively, physically for a couple of years there, mostly like peak in the fall of 2022. And I can share all my theories about what might have happened and what might have led me there. I mean, our third child was just about 1 year old and we hadn't slept through the night in I don't know how long, and we're taking care of 3 kids, and we were being very cautious earlier in the pandemic and just doing so much. I had also had COVID for the first time that spring, and certainly there are at least potential implications of long COVID, which, there are versions of long COVID that are permanent. There are versions of long COVID that last for 6 months to 18 months or 2 years or whatever, right? Anyway, I can theorize about all different kinds of things that might have impacted me that way. We could also call it burnout. Sometimes I use that word to say that was the peak of my burnout. It was really bad. And I was very focused at that point, and then for a long time afterwards about like, hell, to this day, I still will think sometimes about like, oh, I want to get back to like dreaming up stories the way that I used to do, or focusing on building a D&D campaign the way that I used to do. And for a long time, that was all filtered for me through this concept of capacity, right? That I'm not capable of doing that the way, I'm diminished in some way from what I used to be, even though intellectually I could and would identify and remind myself that like, no, there's a bunch of stuff I'm doing now that I didn't used to do back then. I didn't have 3 kids back then. I didn't run a business and have 7 employees back then, and et cetera, et cetera. Right. And over the years, as I've like focused on that and reminded myself of that, it's gotten better to the point where the thought still comes to me sometimes like maybe I am diminished from who I used to be. But part of it too is that I'll think, okay, I burned out and then I had to recover from burnout. And it was a long process, but that's 2 or 3 years of life. And even when I'm fully recovered from burnout, however we define that, I'm 3 years older than I used to be. I'm going to be more tired, probably. My body is a different body. I know and focus on and prioritize different things than I used to. There's no going back in terms of being exactly who I used to be. So what's helpful for me is when I'm comparing myself to a past version of myself or a hypothetical version of myself or somebody else, I identify that, I acknowledge that, recognize that as just a tool that I'm using to identify things that I would like to be different, right? That all I'm really saying is I want to put more work into a D&D campaign again. Whether or not that's something I used to do and don't currently do isn't really important. But if I just treat it as information of like, oh, that's good to know that that's something that I would like to focus on or prioritize, will I? I don't know. Like we talked about, it's inherent to the human experience that you'll want more things than you can have. That's what it means to want something. So that's why I wanted to be careful, because I was at first going to say something like there's no going back. And I didn't want to give the impression that there's no recovering from or improving on your condition, because that's not true and that's not what I mean. But even if your body was, nervous system, all of it was exactly in the same condition it was 3 years ago, minus 3 years of age, that's differences. Mm-hmm. And even if it was exactly the same as it was 3 years ago, your context is not the same as it was 3 years ago. So utilizing it as a way to identify things that you want to pursue is great. Mm-hmm. Using it as a metric for whether you're doing well or whether you are healthy, you will just always think that you are doing poorly and that you are unhealthy, because you cannot be exactly the same. And you'll only focus on the ways in which you were better, or there were things that were different about you then that you would prefer. You're not going to be thinking about the stuff that's better about you in your life right now. I think it's this was Best Insider. I think this is when we were talking about the confidence and impressiveness. I think it's amplified by the plaid. Like, Brandon has a naturally trustworthy face, but with the plaid, it's like if I had 2 puppies on a leash and one ran off, I would instinctively hand the other puppy to Brandon and ask him to hold it while I ran after the other one. I like that. And then the person that I was just speaking to, that makes sense and helps. Thank you, and thank Lizzo. Right? Thank Lizzo. I get that, because right now my creativity is suffering. My writing is not what it used to be. And then I hope you post this as a video so I can replay it later, as this helps. Thank you. Yeah, good news on that front is that this is automatically saved as a video on YouTube. It used to automatically save on Twitch also, but I think we ran out of like storage capacity, and I don't know if like the oldest one gets bumped and replaced with the newest one. But if nothing else, you can go to YouTube and look for the Effective Artistry channel and find it. I mean, at the end of the day, all the things that we're talking about in the realm of therapy, cognition, emotions, anything that's in the subjective internal experience, all of it is filtered through our thoughts, our perceptions, our beliefs, our feelings, right? And so anytime, part of why I focus so much as I have today part of why I focus so much on helping people to understand how inaccurate, inherently inaccurate all of that is because so much of the distress we're dealing with results from trusting our own thoughts and perceptions as though they are 100% true. And there's a fear, certainly, and a discomfort for people who have spent their whole lives thinking that it is possible for thoughts and whatever to be 100% true. There's a fear and a discomfort in acknowledging that that isn't the case, something you've been attempting to accomplish your whole life and have been believing that once you do it and it is possible to do it, that everything in your life will be better from here on out and you'll never have problems or fail or struggle or suffer ever again. It's uncomfortable to give up on that idea at first. But once you recognize the truth of the situation, like I was saying earlier, if I'm wrong, I don't want to persist in being wrong. I want to find out I'm wrong so that I can get a better idea, because we have this inherent sense that having an accurate understanding is useful, or at least more useful than an inaccurate understanding. And that's true, based on the definition of what accurate and inaccurate means. If I'm behaving as though reality is different than it is, that might not cause a problem most of the time, or really even ever, depending on, the specifics. But edge cases and limitations come up and butt up against each other, and problems do arise as a result of acting as though reality is different than it really is. So even if what reality really is different than what we want it to be, it's still better to understand what it is. I need to find better language for this concept, and maybe you all, Olivia, and you in the comments, maybe you can help me with this. But when we talk about anorexia, the diagnostic criteria of that notwithstanding, we're not getting into the specifics of what is a diagnostic label of anorexia versus other things. But when we're talking about the mechanisms behind it, what happens when a person is anorexic or becomes anorexic, one of the things that we focus on is a distorted self-image, right? That a person will look in the mirror and see theoretically, visually whatever they're seeing, but will interpret that and perceive that as being fact, no matter what anybody else would say, because fat and thin is a matter of opinion and it can always be argued. And we all kind of generally acknowledge that one of the mechanisms that leads to that being a reality for people is that our culture, our society, presents unrealistic, impossible ideals about how people are or should be, what makes somebody appealing, and presents unrealistic and impossible ideas about how someone can become that, or how easy it is for someone to become that, or how many people are that. That everybody does this and everybody, it's just easy for them. I'm the only one that's struggling with it. There is a version of that, those things, that mechanism and that distorted self-perception that applies to our sense of productivity, or our own sense of how productive and or valuable we are. We tend to associate, those of us who struggle with this tend to associate self-value with how productive we are. We could talk at length about what we mean by productivity, but that no matter what we end up doing, we'll still evaluate ourselves as not being productive enough. That we have been presented unrealistic and impossible concepts of what people are or should be, what everybody else is, and how easy it is for them to get there. And some of us get convinced by that and believe that it's not only possible, but that it's like the most common thing for people to be, and that it's not even effortful for most other people. So even if we accomplish what we think everybody else is accomplishing, we then just focus on how it's harder for us than it should be, because it's easier for other people to accomplish that amount. Yeah, it's a distorted self-perception. There is no level of productivity, because this is not even an objective thing like thinness and fatness, it's subjective. There is no set of behaviors, no chunk of experience that you will ever be able to definitively and empirically say, I am as productive as I should be. In particular, because the metric people tend to use for this is, do I accomplish everything I want to accomplish? Do I do everything I intend to do? Do I execute every idea I have? You cannot, you will not. Even if one day you execute on 10 ideas and the next day you execute on 100, you just come up with more ideas. And so people get this mistaken idea in their head that I should be able to follow through on every thought, every intention.
Mm-hmm.
And when I fail at that, I judge myself as lacking and I push myself. But in the same way that if someone were to say, I want to be as productive as possible and therefore I'm going to only sleep for 2 hours a night, that's going to actually be detrimental to their ability to engage in whatever it is they're calling productive tasks. Same thing. We're doing things that inhibit our ability to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. The solution here, to me, is not to be able to convince people that they are as productive as they should be, because we are always, all of us, going to have things that we want to accomplish, that we think it would be good to accomplish for ourselves and for others, that we're not. That's not going to change. The only thing I can identify as being helpful is helping people to understand that you shouldn't trust your own self-perception. You're always going to think that you should be more productive. That's just, again, inherent to what it means to want something. I wish I was accomplishing all the things I want to accomplish. That's just what it means to want to accomplish something. You'll always wish you were doing more. If you evaluate that the only way to determine that you've done enough is if you no longer wish to do more, that will never happen. It leads to burnout and worse and all kinds of things. So I'm really trying for myself and for everyone else to push this idea over and over to help everyone understand, just because you perceive something a particular way doesn't mean it's true. You shouldn't trust and rely on your own evaluation of stuff to the extent that it causes you problems. Now, we're all trying to do our best, right? Because the opposite direction of that, going out of balance in the opposite direction, is I don't trust my own perceptions at all. We can talk about gaslighting and go down that path. Honestly, I think all of this is oversimplified, and the truth is that everything we think is influenced by everything that every person around us has ever communicated to us, intentionally or unintentionally, blah, blah, blah. But it's not that you have to say that none of my ideas are accurate, but you also shouldn't say that all of your ideas are accurate. Every idea you have is the best idea you have, and you should be actively engaged in the process. You would benefit from being actively engaged in the process of finding the flaws and limitations in your current understandings to come to better ones. And those better ones won't be perfect either, but you can continue to actively engage in the process of becoming more aware of the limitations and understanding, finding out how you're wrong, so you can repair that inaccuracy. You'll never be right, but you can be less wrong. I tell clients sometimes that if I were to put together a search committee and gave the instruction that they should evaluate every single person in the world in order to identify for me who would be the absolute worst person to rely on as a judge of that client, that search committee would return the answer, the client themselves. You are literally the worst person at evaluating yourself accurately. Even entire complete strangers would at least acknowledge that they don't know you and therefore not say stuff so confidently. But we are all very confident in our own self-assessment. And it makes it hard for us to change those things. But when your understanding and reality don't match up with one another, it's because your understanding is inaccurate, not because reality is functioning differently than it is meant to be. So it's uncomfortable, scary, painful, especially for those of us who have certain patterns of experience and behavior and focuses and navigate the world in certain ways and accomplish things successfully in certain ways, who tend to identify our values being locked up in the way that we understand things. Coming to an understanding that that is, even at its best, inaccurate in the sense of being incomplete, can be really terrifying, but it's also really, really liberating if you get through to the other side of it. And that's what I'm trying to do right now with this big old monologue, is help with like a gentle scaffolding of helping people to work through it and come to the other side and just say, stop trying to be right about everything. You won't. You can try to learn where you're wrong so that you can accommodate for those things. It can't be right, though. Uh, it's interesting, and probably a lot of people. Oh, it's interesting. I and probably a lot of people understand that people and times and life changes, but I found that I've never been more nostalgic than I've ever been in my life. As an example, I've always loved Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but I find that now when I read a comic or watch one of the movies, I feel more comfort than I did before. Before I was like, oh yeah, I like turtles, but now it's almost like a distraction or escape for a bit of the present, which I am struggling with some. Because of my health condition, I am currently not working, so I do feel unproductive sometimes, but I'm still there for my family and trying to heal, so I tell myself that. I've tried to make the point in the past that therapy, which people tend to think of as applied psychology, that the thing that makes therapists and therapy beneficial is that they understand human psychology. Uh, that's not the case, at least in my opinion. Therapy is actually applied philosophy. Effective therapists are philosophers, not psychologists. And I don't mean by training. Psychologist is an actual licensure. I'm not, saying that no psychologists are good therapists. But what we're talking about is the mind. By definition, a thing that is not empirically observable. We're dealing with things that cannot be empirically observed and therefore cannot be determined to be true or correct or incorrect or false. And here's a fun thing. I don't know, fun. Unrelated, but I think I mentioned the other day that I couldn't remember when I started following effective artistry. Oh. If I ask you all who are paying attention to this, like, think of a nightmare or a stress dream that you have.
Oh my gosh.
But I found it. What happens in it? From 2021. Wow.
I like the way this is scaffolding in finding out new information.
Yeah. Let me say it this way. The most common nightmare or stress dream in the United States involves school. I think pretty much everybody can identify with that we have nightmares or stress dreams involving school. I'm naked in school. I have to give a test or take a test I'm not prepared for, etc. Well, we've done research, surveys by country, and school being the most common nightmare is the United States and the United Kingdom. Those are the only two. Every other country, we get some other answer. And obviously, I heard Brandon first through the ADHD Rewired podcast. Oh yeah, Sarah, she's great. Oh wait, no, ADHD Rewired. That's not Sarah. She's ADHD artist. ADHD Rewired is either Eric Tivers or Brandon Mahan. I don't remember. Brendan Mahan. Anyway, obviously you couldn't have a nightmare or a stress dream about school if you didn't have experiences of school, right? That wouldn't make any sense. It would not be perceptible to you, or if it was, you wouldn't identify it as being related to school. So this is a culturally impacted thing. Do you consciously choose to have these dreams? Of course not. If anything, whenever we consider them consciously, it's with a desire to avoid having those kinds of dreams. But we do. So just as a very strong piece of evidence that I hope almost everyone can relate to understand that there's more than just conscious understandings and there's more than just biology that impacts the experiences that we have. Our experiences, the ways in which we interact with the environment and the things that happen around us and to us and the language that we're exposed to and that we learn and utilize, all that impacts all of this stuff. So I hate not, again, I want to be clear. When you're saying, but now it's almost like a distraction or an escape, I hate it when people use that language, not meaning that I think you're doing something wrong, but meaning that I think that the culture and the language that you've been exposed to has made things worse for you. In identifying an enjoyable experience as something that you shouldn't do because you're doing it for the wrong reasons. But we don't talk about going to sleep as an escape or a distraction. We don't talk about, I don't know, taking a shower or eating food or spending time with friends or whatever. We don't generally talk about those as escapes or distractions. When we're labeling something as an escape or a distraction, what we're saying is the only value this thing has is the fact that it draws our attention away from some other thing. And the other thing is the thing that we would benefit more from paying attention to. You know, this is a distraction from something, this other thing. And the fact that this is a distraction implies, it means that this other thing is something that we should be paying attention to, that would benefit us to pay attention to it. But that's a psychological concept, like a pop psychology concept. It's just a different way of identifying that you shouldn't do things. One of the core problematic premises in our culture is feeling bad is good and feeling good is bad. You're sitting here saying, I feel comfort when I engage with these things. You're saying you feel more comfort now than you used to. Before I was like, oh yeah, I like turtles, but now I feel more comfort, and immediately followed up with, but now it's almost like a distraction or escape, as though the only explanation for why you would feel more comfort is because it's pulling your attention away from other stuff that you really should be paying attention to. This is not a belief that you arrived at on your own. And it's not to say that somebody like convinced you of it explicitly, but feeling good is bad and feeling bad is good. That's a core belief in our culture. We talk about motivation all the time. What do people mean when they say motivation? Generally, people are talking about feeling bad, feeling stressed, feeling anxious, feeling pressured. That's what gets me to do stuff. Feeling afraid of negative consequences. That's what gets me to do stuff. That's not how it works. Imagine a task, pick any task. There are two different scenarios, one in which you are in a great deal of pain and one in which you are in no pain. In which of those scenarios are you more likely to accomplish the task? Even if you were to accomplish that task in both of those cases, in which case would it be easier for you and leave you with more of an ability to accomplish further tasks? Pain, whether physical or emotional, it serves the purpose of drawing our attention to something. That's the function of it. That's why we generate these feelings, right? Pain is not something that exists in the environment. In response to some environmental stimuli, our own body has the capacity to generate a signal that we interpret as pain. We call this sense nociception. It takes resources to generate that sense. We're spending literal calories and glucose and other things to generate that sensation in our nervous system. It is taxing even if it wasn't unpleasant to experience. So it's important. We wouldn't waste resources on something that isn't valuable. But the reason it's important is to draw our attention to something. Once we're paying attention to it, it can be useful as we experiment to see like what helps and what hurts, right? When I pushed up on this earlier and it hurt, whatever the reason was, that's a clear sign from my body of, hey, don't do that right now. And I have not done it again since. And it's probably going to be a while before I do. So it's just a useful piece of information to draw our attention and to allow us to get immediate feedback of like, let me experiment. Does the pain get better or worse? But once we've identified what the problem is and what the solution is, the pain no longer serves a purpose and only gets in the way. That's why we take pain medication when you're in the hospital, right? Emotional pain and discomfort is the same thing. It serves the purpose of drawing our stress is like, ooh, I should think about this thing. It's important to think about. It doesn't provide me any benefit in accomplishing the thing. And it actually gets in the way because I'm spending resources on generating the feeling of stress. Again, Pick any task. Imagine one scenario in which you are very stressed and one scenario in which you are not stressed at all. In which of those cases are you better able to accomplish the task? It's obviously logically untrue that feeling badly benefits us. We can identify that, but we still act as though it is true that feeling badly is good for us and feeling good is bad for us. Pain is in the mind. If I think hard enough and perform a mind meld with my very concerned captain, I can will the pain away. If someone says, I have a midlife crisis, what does that mean? From a professional standpoint, is there a term for this? Does it share similar feelings for people, and what drives it? And if I can't, I'm not a real Vulcan. Those got split up between people. What are you thinking right now, Olivia, before I respond to those things?
Me? I'm kind of in like a space case world right now. Like I'm listening to what you're saying and I'm liking what you're saying and I'm agreeing with what you're saying. But if I had to like respond back like I am right now, this is the best I can give. And I'm also like very distracted, or I am distracted. My attention is being taken away from you by looking at the comments too. It's happening a lot.
Great. That initial response was built on the implication that there's some way you should be thinking or responding that would be better than what you are, and there isn't. In fact, honestly, part of what how to explain it exactly? Part of what is beneficial about the experience of doing therapy when I do therapy. So that's very comfy.
And I've got my cookie-shaped pillows.
Part of the benefit of when I'm doing therapy with people, and part of what I, believe part of the benefit might be about this stream, don't be overly explanatory, Brandon, is taking people who are used to understanding everything intellectually, or at least feeling as though they understand everything intellectually, and confusing them without scaring them. Creating that experience, a real, actual, lived, visceral experience of, I don't really understand it, but I don't dislike it either, which kind of greases the wheels for leaning further into that idea that understanding is an illusion. You don't need to understand everything. It's not unhelpful to feel as though you understand something all the time, but it's sometimes very problematic and it's not necessary.
And I think that goes back to like when I was talking about entering conversations and like wanting to appear smart or wanting to understand. What am I trying to say? I feel like I think that I need to understand everything by the end of a conversation. And if I don't, I have not succeeded that task, which is an impossible task to succeed in.
Yeah. I mean, a very common conversation for me to have with clients is, after we've been seeing each other for a while, they'll say something like, I feel like I haven't gotten anything out of this, meaning like, I feel like I haven't learned anything, or I don't understand anything that I didn't understand before.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll say, okay, but compare your life now to your life 6 months ago, specifically looking at the things that you identified at the beginning that you wanted to change. And every time they're like, oh yeah, that's actually gotten a lot better.
Yeah.
Therapy and therapists and people surrounding this concept, influencers and self-help gurus and whatever, they're incentivized to give the impression that the benefit of this comes from the knowledge and the understanding that you gain from it. Because if I'm going to sell a book or, make a video for public release or whatever, I obviously can't make the claim that it is individually tailored to create an experience for a particular person. So I have to lean on the idea that the content, the information contained in the book or the video or whatever, is the part that is helpful. And because the kinds of people who are interested in therapy and self-help and all that kind of stuff are generally people who already believe that knowledge and understanding is the key to all happiness and success, it's just fertile ground. And it all reinforces this concept. But that's like saying that you should be able to read a book and watch some videos about lifting weights and your muscles will get bigger. It's not how it works. You can't just understand something or know something and then everything changes. That does, again, all these tools are useful given specific criteria, Control Alt Delete solves some problems, but a very narrow, constrained set of problems, not everything. So new and different understandings solve some problems, or at least help with some problems, whatever, but not everything. Especially when people are talking about like, I struggle with social anxiety, and then acting as though if they have a different understanding of why they're anxious, that somehow it will go away. That doesn't involve like having to do anything, socialize with people. Uh, like I know it's this is in response to the midlife crisis, and we'll talk about this. Like I know in media or comedies, a midlife crisis is getting a sports car and dating someone 20 years younger. But what does it really look like for most people? And is it common? For me, I feel like I'm also burnt out from being a responsible adult for so long, and I feel like I need a break and just have fun, even though I know I can't dump all my responsibilities. And then Bastard Cider talking about your pillows is very cute. They look very soft. And then when I'm feeling really burnt out and taking breaks isn't helping, usually what helps me the most is what I mentally abbreviate to Shinakute 2? Shinakute E? Is that Japanese? Shinakute E? I don't know. Or it's okay even if you don't do it. The phrase is from a poem that helps me think about the concept. I think about how I could drop all the responsibilities, how I would do that, what I would do instead, and try to think in a lot of detail what I would change. Ooh, there's some good stuff there. It helps me appreciate why I'm doing things. Okay, midlife crisis. Midlife crisis is one of those things where I got it the last time, so it was Japanese. Midlife crisis is one of those things where we just observe a certain pattern of behaviors or experiences and then come up with a label to name that pattern of things. And because the label we came up with to call those experiences implies causality, in other words, calling it a midlife crisis implies that it is happening because of some crisis that a person has in the middle of their life. We then naturally, everybody, as the concept gets disseminated, everybody just comes to the conclusion, operates as though it is true that why people do the things that we're talking about is because of a midlife crisis, instead of just what the things we're talking about is something we decided to call a midlife crisis. Media or comedies, a midlife crisis, getting a sports car and dating someone 20 years younger. Notably, that's for men, and specifically men from the baby boomer generation. We're talking about like the parents of the main characters in Friends, right? I can give some of my theories about some of that, but in the that concept of it is specific to a particular gender, a particular socioeconomic class. Having the ability to afford buying a sports car, and a particular generation. It's not going to look like that for people who don't fall into that category. Here's what I would say about a midlife crisis. First of all, ain't nobody know what the middle of their life is. And like evolutionarily speaking, through the history of our species, life expectancy has changed fairly drastically over the last few hundred years, right? So if this was some biological function built into us by the process of evolution, then midlife crisis would happen when you're in your late 20s and early 30s at most. Fun fact, just a little trivia thing to explain that, because people talk about like average life expectancy used to be like 35 or whatever, which is true, but that's only because of a massive infant mortality rate. That it was something like, I don't want to speak out of turn. I don't remember the exact statistic, but it's like less than half of children survived to the age of 5. And so that weights the distribution down. But for people who survived past the age of 5, the life expectancy was still in the like upper 50s, low 60s, whatever. So it cannot be that there's a biological thing going on here, or that if there is, it cannot be related to being in the middle of a person's life. Also, like we were talking about with the nightmare thing, the fact that what a person does when they're experiencing what we call a midlife crisis is culturally determined. Again, solid evidence that this is not a biological thing. It is culturally influenced, impacted. Personally, this is what I think about what we call the midlife crisis. Our culture, for I would say the last 100 years or so, really, again, primarily starting with the baby boom generation. This isn't about some like intrinsic thing about that generation or people of a certain age. When I'm talking about generational differences, I'm talking about like, what was true of people's environment and experiences in large cultural ways at certain times. That if you if you were, you know, between the ages of 8 and 18 during the Great Depression, it is quite likely that a lot of the things that you learned and that influenced the way you navigated the rest of your life were influenced by the concept of you should save stuff up because you never know when everything's going to be taken away from you. Right. So there's a relatively recent concept, big in our culture, that we pretend is not new, that the older you are, the more you should, let me say that differently, that the younger you are, the less happy you should allow yourself to be in order to defer that happiness later. In other words, work, do all the things you're supposed to do so that you can enjoy a nice, comfortable retirement. Is part of the reason that really is primarily geared around the baby boom generation is because of how corporations were constructed post World War II. The idea of like health insurance being given as a benefit, for example, started during World War II in the United States. Hold on, a couple comments. It's easier for me to work hard at my job if I tell myself I could drop it and do something much easier, but I'm choosing to continue working about it because I care about the work I do, and I could just stop communicating with all my current friends and move somewhere where no one knows me so I don't have to deal with social obligations, but I'm choosing to invest time and effort into these relationships. It takes a lot of the pressure off of me. Temosa yaparisa shitakunai koto wa shinakute to omoyone. I don't speak Japanese, so I don't know what that meant. And then the person asked me about midlife crisis. I'm only 40, elder millennial with Gen Z kids, and I feel like according to them, we might as well be boomers. LOL. Yeah, boomers at this point has taken on, as a piece of language, has taken on a different connotation and is just a way of saying like grown-ups or fuddy-duddies or old people, just a way of talking about like you don't understand what it's like to be a kid. That's not new, just that language gets applied to it. I'll be 40 in, I don't know, 6 months, 7 or 8 months. And I'm not sure what the generation name for my children are right now. I've heard like Gen Alpha and whatever, but anyway, we were talking earlier about that inherent tension in being human, where the body is only aware of the present environment, like the actual physical reality, and therefore can only take that information into account. That's why there's no noticeable, like there's no time lag or whatever, no consciousness insert. Consciousness can only consider things which aren't currently present. And there's a tension between those two things. Well, this thing would feel good to do right now. My body has an impulse to do this thing, but I have an understanding that doing this other thing instead would result in greater benefit later on. Hugely, hugely advantageous. There's a reason that to the limits of our knowledge, we are the dominant life form in the entire universe, right? I think Gen Alpha is considered anyone born in the 2010s to now. So yeah, my kids would be Gen Alpha. But as we've been talking about, consciousness, cognition cannot be correct. All models are wrong. Some models are useful. We can come to understandings that are useful, but they're never going to be perfectly accurate. Even if I say something like, if I don't know, if I bet $10 that the Bears will win, and then the Bears, I will win that bet and win $20, and then that happens, I can say, oh, my thought was accurate. And sure, it was, because it was accurate in the ways that were relevant to the decision that you made, even though it didn't encapsulate other information which was irrelevant to the outcome you were talking about, right? In other words, we are constructed in a way that is built on the concept that it is beneficial to do things in the present that are less preferable in exchange for things in the future which are more preferable, which is hugely advantageous because it allows us to do long-term plan. Like you can't have agriculture if you can't have the concept that by putting a seed in the ground and doing this and doing that, it will result in food I can eat later on. I feel like every generation had different struggles, but every generation thinks the younger generation have it easy. Oh, yeah, for sure. Hopefully, theoretically, every generation is supposed to have it easier. That's what we're working on. But there's all kinds of statistics you can point at in particular areas or metrics where things aren't better for certain generations than previous ones. Anyway, so the trick here and why we are talking this whole time about how concerned we all are about having correct ideas is because if I'm going to pay some cost, make some sacrifice, forego some benefit in order for a payout later, well, that's really good to do when the payout happens the way that I predicted that it would. And it's really terrible to do when actually it turns out that not only does the payout not happen, but sometimes actually things are worse than if I had just done what I would have wanted to do in the first place. Does that make sense? If I want to, I don't know, go hang out with my friends, but I've got a paper that's due in a couple weeks. So I pass up on going to hang out with my friends to work on this paper. Well, if I end up getting that paper turned in and get the grade I wanted and off, blah blah blah, then okay, I might say like that was a good decision. I'm glad I did that. But if a week later classes are canceled and the assignment is canceled and nobody needs to turn in that paper at all anymore, well, then I'm going to be like, well, I wish I had gone out with my friends. So we're doing this evaluation of what do we think will happen, and secondarily, how confident are we in that prediction that it will happen? And we engage in activities, we do things, we make sacrifices for future benefit. And every step along the way, we're evaluating, not every single moment, but every once in a while, we check back in and reevaluate like, is this still, do I think this will work? Is this worth continuing to try? We come into new information where we can then be like, oh no, you know what? I should switch to this other thing. I should change. I should give up, whatever. Or we get reinforced like, no, I think it's going to work. When we're talking about career in the specific structure of the United States culture, starting in the mid 20th century, the whole structure is based on you have the worst time at the beginning of your career, an entry level position. You got to pay your dues, you make the least, you have to do the crappiest work. But as long as you do it, it pays off and you get promotions where you get better duties, better pay, etc. And ultimately, the idea is that you then get to retire on a pension or whatever at the age of 65 and spend your remaining 1, 2, 3 decades just enjoying life and doing whatever you want. Right? Well, obviously, that's worked out for many people that they did the annoying and frustrating entry level thing and they got promoted and they got promoted and they got promoted and eventually retired and have their second home and their boat and they travel the world and take cruises and are enjoying their retirement years. But sometimes people die when they're 56 or 32 or whatever. And if that's the case, then was it worth making all that sacrifice and foregoing all the things that would have brought you joy in order for a delayed payoff? No. I think what happens with the midlife crisis is that people are engaged in this process in our culture of deferring joy. We call this delayed gratification. By the way, is a concept that was invented by, named by the man who did the Stanford marshmallow experiment, marshmallow test, which is the only evidence that supports the idea of delayed gratification as though it is like a good thing or beneficial for people, and wasn't re-explored or attempted to be replicated for decades. And as soon as it was, no, doesn't hold up. That's a bunch of nonsense. That's not real. There is no inherent benefit to being more willing to wait for gratification. Or if there is, there's not a way for us to be able to observe it. It's just an idea somebody had and more or less massaged the data from an experiment to support that idea. And the cultural narrative is very beneficial for a lot of people, especially people who have power, because they believe it and they've benefited from it. So it's not necessarily a, acting in bad faith, trying to manipulate other people by saying, pay your dues and you'll pay off, although that certainly happens sometimes. But people saying that I paid my dues and it paid off, and I genuinely love and care about you, and I'm trying to help you understand that even though you don't want to do this right now, if you pay your dues, it will pay off for you. Can I actually know that? No, of course not. I can't predict the future, but I'm giving you the best advice I can give you. Right. Anyway, I think what happens with the midlife crisis is at a certain point, people look around after they've spent 20 years engaged in work that they're not happy with, 20 years making sacrifices and foregoing things that they wanted. Like, I never bought that car I wanted because I needed to put money away for the kids' college fund or whatever. And they hit a certain point where they're like, no, this is nonsense. I should go after some of the things that I want now. And, like, I've hit the point where things should start to be paying off for me, and I should start to get the things that I want and not just have to keep making sacrifices. Again, cultural, gender, blah, 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 lots of variables play into like what a particular person does in that experience. But I think that's the underlying mechanism behind the midlife crisis is people saying, I'm checking back in with some of this stuff. I've been banging my head against the wall for 20 years because I've always believed that it will pay off. And either starting to recognize that it hasn't paid off yet and questioning whether it ever will, and maybe I should just go for what I want now, or coming to the conclusion that, like, okay, well, if it's going to pay off, this is time for it to pay off, and start doing it. I think people just get tired of foregoing the things that they want. And I think the longer that you suppress that, the longer that you prevent yourself from going after things that you want for no good reason, if you come to the conclusion that there wasn't any good reason, then the more you are likely to overreact into only what I want matters. If I spend 30 years not thinking about what I want and only doing what I think will benefit other people, and then have an experience one day where I'm like, this is never going to pay off for me, then I'm more likely to be like, you know what? I don't give a crap how anyone else is impacted. I'm getting divorced. I'm dating a young girl. I don't care. Whatever. This is one of those cases in which, like, pursuing your happiness earlier is going to prevent something worse from happening later. And yeah, for our generation, it tends to be a lot more about, like, this is just trend lines or whatever, right? But it tends to be more along the lines of, here's this thing that I wanted to do when I was young, but I was convinced was not the safe option career wise. And I went and did this other thing instead, went to college and did this and did that. And now I've been successful in that to some extent, and I have money to be able to stop being a lawyer and open my cupcake shop if that's what I want to do. In particular, art, right? Like, I dedicated my life to parenting and to, working in human resources. And now I'm not needed as much in the parenting department. And it's finally time to go back to working on the art that I wanted to work on 20 years ago. I don't know why the word said in that particular way helps me more than just saying it's okay to not do the things you have to do, but it does. So there's the exact quote in case it helps anyone else. And trust me, this is a compliment, but I'm a trained peer support specialist, but I feel like I'm talking to a peer even though you're clinically trained and above the peer specialist in a clinical setting. What I mean by that is that your knowledge, delivery, and communication seems like it would be easy to talk to you. Well, thank you. Appreciate that. As someone with coin-operated neurons who can't function without regular dopamine deposits, said jokingly, thank goodness. Especially in college, I spent a lot of time frustrated with other people who would not do anything fun because they would rather sit at home and feel bad about how they weren't doing coursework. I just wanted to convince them that we can work together on projects after we also go for a hike or eat some good food, or at least promise that we will do fun things later. Yeah, again, feeling bad is good, feeling good is bad, right? That's that description. I appreciate what you're saying. I endeavor to communicate in accessible and understandable ways, not to be like, look at all these impressive things I know. I'm impressing you by making it so that you cannot understand what I'm saying, which will make you think that I must be brilliant. I'm trying to make it accessible and as helpful as it can be, which is part of what leads people to being confused and exhausted by the time we're working together. Because if I was deliberately being obtuse or not making a particular effort to communicate clearly, that gets real old real quick. But when you can interpret, like, this person I genuinely believe has helpful things to say and is intending and attempting to be helpful and are doing their best, then like, yeah, I want to keep getting as much of it as possible, even though I'm exhausted and I want to wrap up.
I texted, I think my first day of my internship, I texted some of the clinicians there and I was like, is it normal for you to just feel like mush at the end of the day? Like, does that go away? They're like, sometimes, but we keep
It's
coming back.
worse early and better later. Just like anything, you get used to things. And in particular, what makes it easiest is when you stop trying to be right with everything that you say
Mhm.
and just say what comes out and pay attention to it, respond to it. I've been talking a lot lately about what I call true confidence versus what I call false confidence, where false confidence is what I think most people would identify confidence as. It's, I believe that my next attempt will be successful. I believe that I will get this job. I believe that I will, that this song will be a hit, whatever.
Mhm.
Which is very like flimsy and ephemeral because how much I believe that, I mean, that's a prediction. My prediction can shift, but even if my prediction doesn't shift, how much I trust my prediction can shift. Where what I think of as true confidence is I believe that executing on the best idea I have will get me closer to success. It won't kill me or hurt me, and I'll learn from it, and then I can try again. And once you approach something in that way, it's easy to do stuff, at least cognitively, right? Like obviously pushing a car up a hill is still difficult to do. But in terms of like making your art, for example, the thing that tends to get in the way of that, well, more than anything, the thing that tends to get in the way of that is that people just don't have the resources available because they're spending it on other stuff throughout the course of their day. And they're saying, well, tonight when I'm free and the kids are asleep or whatever, that's when I'll work on my art. And by the time that time comes, like, no, I'm just depleted and I don't have the resources. And it's not reasonable for me to keep saying, certainly tomorrow I'll somehow have energy left, but I'll still do all the same stuff during the day. Beyond that, though, I think the most common issue with people who are trying to work on their art and are struggling is they're trying to make art that they think is good. Like trying to devise the perfect painting before you put any paint on the canvas, trying to figure out exactly the words that you want to say before writing a draft. And you just have to embrace this idea of like, I'm going to execute on my best idea. If it works, awesome. If it doesn't work, I'll learn more and then I'll iterate. Everything gets easier that way. I know that probably sounds like a ridiculous thing for a therapist to say because so much of this rests in people's minds. People think that so much of this rests on the idea of understanding things, getting the correct, oh, you do this because of this early childhood experience, or you do this, you feel this because of this past trauma. And I'm not dismissing the utility of those analyses. They can be helpful in and of themselves, and they can certainly lead us to helpful ideas about what's worth trying next. But the kinds of people who become therapists and the kinds of people who pursue therapy tend to believe that the way to solve all problems is to understand them correctly. And so training those kinds of people like you, Olivia, and like everybody else that works with it, and myself, training us all to be like, nope, this isn't about understanding it correctly. That's not possible. This is just about doing certain set of things, regardless of whether you understand it or not. Really difficult. We don't like to give up on, like, I want to know what's going to happen before I do something. I don't want to just try. What if it hurts their feelings? What if they get mad at me? What if they fire me or give me a bad review? Like we like to be able to predict how things are going to go. And so it's hard for us to lean into and embrace like, no, you just put a word on paper and then another word. Put some paint on the canvas and then some. Hit a note and then another. Say a word and then another. You got to do stuff. You can't just think about how you should do stuff. This is the problem with that core premise of feeling bad is good is if I think about things in the right way, then I'll do stuff. If I think about things in a way that's really stressful and unpleasant, then things will just automatically happen. I won't have to like effortfully do anything. So I'm just going to think about it and think about it until it automatically happens, which doesn't work.
Brandon, have you seen it's a video that's kind of circling around now, and it's a guy, but he's like talking to himself in a different outfit, and he has a cup, and he's like, "Help yourself," and the guy's like, "I can't," and they have kind of a conversation about like what that means. But then at the end, like the guy who says, "I can't," pours the cup for the other guy. He's like, "Okay, now help yourself," and he's like, "But I can't." Have you seen this?
I haven't, but keep
I
going.
I I don't recall it enough to talk about it, or at least to my standards, I don't feel that way. I would love to send it to you and hear your thoughts about it.
Here's what I'll say.
Okay.
There are things that you can do for other people that you cannot do for yourself. I
Hmm.
can see other people's eyeballs. I cannot see my own. I
Hmm.
can see an image or a reflection of my eyeballs, but I can't see my eyeballs. I can touch your right elbow with my right hand, but I can't touch my own right elbow with my own right hand. And those things don't bother us because we know that that's not possible to do
Hmm.
for ourselves. We have no misunderstanding that just because I can do it for or to another person, I should therefore be able to do it for myself. But in the realm of psychology, therapy, whatever, all this stuff, we get confused because again, we think it's about knowing stuff. And if I know the right stuff that allows me to help somebody else in a certain way, then knowing that stuff should help me to help myself in a particular way. That's not how it works.
Hmm.
Just doesn't. You there's a Have you heard the song "Wake Up Today" by Elisa Amador? No, I have not. By the way,
No.
Olivia, how many times I've said it, including in the video you just talked about. How many times I've been like, no, no idea what that is, never heard of it.
Hmm.
And it doesn't impact any you, doesn't make you perceive me as less knowledgeable or less worth listening to.
Meanwhile, I'm bawling because I don't know this song. I'm just kidding.
Uh, there's an old, I don't know, proverb or story. I'm not clear on the origins of it, but it basically goes that a person is taken to see heaven and hell. You know,
Hmm.
they get a glimpse of what it's like. And in hell, it's all these people sitting at an endless banquet table that is just piled with like delicious feast worth of food, but everybody is starving. And then in heaven, it's the exact same scenario, but everybody is well nourished and happy. And and the person says, "I don't understand. What's the difference?" And the person who's taken them to show them these images says, "Well, everybody only has utensils that are 6 feet long, you know, chopsticks or whatever, that are 6 feet long. So nobody can pick up food and get it to their own mouth, but anybody could pick up food and get it to the mouth of the person next to or across from them. So the only difference is that in one scenario, people are trying to help themselves and are incapable of it, and either are unwilling or unaware of that it's even worth trying to help one another. And in the other, everybody's helping each other. I think that's the point. This is not about understanding
Yeah.
emotion, cognition, language, thought, intellect, all the whatever words you want to use. All of these things are literally constructed by our interactions with other humans. Think a thought right now without using words or images or symbols that other people came up with before you did. So the idea that you could, it's kind of like saying like, um, I don't know, what's another example? It's kind of like saying, you know, like I can get other people to bounce up and down on a teeter totter, but I can't do it for myself. It's it's an activity that by its very nature relies on it being interpersonal. It's
Hmm.
not a matter of individual knowledge or capability. It is a matter of categorically what is required, definitively what is the thing that we are talking about. Emotion and thought are interpersonal in nature, even though you think they're not. When you're thinking and feeling stuff by yourself, you think nobody else is involved. That's not true. Other people are involved.
Hmm.
The way you think of everything is shaped by other people. You can't do anything about that without interacting with other people.
Hmm.
That's what actually makes therapy valuable. The value that people get out of therapy is not completely different than the value that many people throughout history have gotten from talking to clergy or talking to the local spiritual leader or guide or whatever. The value that comes from therapy is what happens as a result of a particular type of interpersonal interaction.
Hmm.
And it's great that we have used the lens of science and empiricism to try and codify that in order to be able to, execute it at scale rather than just relying on the unknowable individual characteristics or whatever. Certainly, it is not perfect. It's very flawed, and there's lots of people that are therapists that don't help. There's people who are therapists that are very harmful. And there's lots that are very helpful. But when therapy is helpful, it is because of the interpersonal interaction, not because of the information you get from your therapist. The song is about waking up and feeling overwhelmed with bad feelings, but trying to keep going anyway with little steps. In the song, most lines start with the word try. So she repeats the phrase over and over, and the way it feels to me like she's hopeful because she keeps trying, while at the same time emphasizing how hard it is because you have to keep trying constantly over and over. Sorry, tangentially related, but I thought of it because you were talking about trying. Yeah, I mean, trying is one of those words that can be difficult for people because when I talk about trying, what I mean is taking action, using your body to interact with the physical environment in some way that results in an impact. But a lot of the time, what people mean by trying, when they say trying, is attempting to will themselves or setting an intention to do a thing, whether or not that actually results in doing it. So if someone's like, I'm not working on my art, and somebody says, well, you just need to try harder. That's what they're talking about. Think about it differently and it'll happen. But so much of this is just, as soon as you understand there's not a secret, like if you want to work on your art, this is going to sound reductive and it like is language that gets used by people who are not helpful. If you want to work on your art, at the end of the day, you're going to have to at some point sit down and like move your hand to work on your art. There is no secret to that. You just have to do it. If for some reason you are unable to do it, it's only because either you cannot afford to do it, you don't have the resources to spare to be able to spend on it, because we have finite resources, or because you are attempting to do that, but you're putting your resources towards some other activity that you believe will result in that. Like if I think about it the right way, that will result in paint hitting the canvas. That's why I'm trying to get rid of this idea that if you think about it the right way, paint will get on the canvas. We were talking about impulse at the beginning, and I got to wrap up here in a minute, but we have the ability to override impulse. That's what we've been talking about, right? My body's impulse is to eat something, but then consciously I can say, no, if I eat that, it will result in GI distress for me later, so I won't. I use the word effort to refer to the resource that it takes to override an impulse, to make ourselves do something that we don't have the impulse to do, or to stop from doing something that we do have the impulse to do. And it is fine. Hi, buddy. I'm wrapping up. I'll be right there, okay? But can I see? No, because this is for the whole internet, not just one person. Yeah, it's a finite thing. So if you spend all day making yourself do stuff that you don't have the impulse to do, then later you won't have any effort left to make yourself paint when that's not what your impulse is. If you spend all day holding yourself back from...
Sorry, the comment. The whole internet? Where?
He's come in the past to say hello. Like when I've had meetings with staff or whatever, he'll sit on my lap and say hello to people. And I didn't know how to explain it before. Anyway, yeah, if there's something that you intend to do and you're not doing it, either you are doing it, you're just identifying whatever you're doing as though it is not an attempt to accomplish the thing, but it is your attempt to accomplish the thing. You're trying to paint by thinking about painting, or you just don't have the resources available. Once you know that, it's not magic anymore. Is it always easy to solve? No, because we have limitations. Like you have other things throughout the day that are important to you, and maybe it's not feasible right now to change things in a way that allow you to have the effort left over at night to do the thing. But at least it puts constraints, right? Like everybody treats electricity like it's magic. Like I don't want to work on wires and switches and stuff because I don't understand it. But it's just wires are just pieces of metal covered with rubber or plastic that insulates, and electricity goes along metal. Like if a switch isn't working, there's a very finite number of things that could be wrong. You won't necessarily be able to identify what is wrong specifically, or even if you do, you won't necessarily be able to repair it. You might not have the tools or the whatever. But that doesn't mean that there's some magic other thing. Oh, the spirits in the walls have disrupted the electricity. No, there's a limited set of stuff, and that makes it a lot easier interact with these things. And every time somebody introduces a new concept of like, did you know sometimes switches don't work because at a specific elevation, and when there's a specific barometric pressure during a certain time of year, that causes the electrons in the air to whatever. Like, even if that were true, all that does is makes me less willing to try and figure out what's going on with my switch, because it's like, oh, there's clearly stuff here that I don't know about. It's both more complicated, but also much, much, much less complicated than everybody wants it to be. All these concepts, midlife crises, trauma, everything, they're all useful concepts, but they're just tools that people came up with. They're not describing the reality and the causal effect of how it works to be human. When we talk about it that way, it just scares everybody from being like, I don't even understand my own self. Psychologists understand me better than I understand myself. That's absurd. How could that be?
Mm-hmm.
I know you don't understand your own self, but I understand you less than you do. That's why you're an encyclopedia on you, Olivia. And it's very important that people understand that. I have lots of information that you don't have.
I was
It's
thinking
presumably,
when they commented on my couch, I'm like, I could tell you so many stories about this couch and how I got it and the foam shortage that went. It was like, and then I started realizing just little
yeah,
connections. Yeah, it's funny.
part of the reason Bast Insider's been here since 2021, which, wow, what a relationship. That's awesome.
Mhm.
Thank you. Nice to have known you that long. Is because I talked about D&D early on,
Mhm.
because I didn't have a criteria for, well, I don't have the right kind of knowledge and D&D is not the right kind. I just used what I had and what came out. And it's helpful to the people it's helpful. All right, I got to go. It's good
Bye,
to be
Brett.
with you.
Feel better, all right?
Yeah, you too. Bye,
Thanks.
everybody.